Hi, everybody. My name is Meaghan O'Neill. I am the editor-in-chief of treehugger.com and planetgreen.com, and I'll be hosting your panel here today. We have, to my left, Jim Stanway, who's the Senior Director of Global Supplier Initiatives at Walmart. In the middle here, we have Elizabeth Sturkin, who's the Managing Director of Corporate Partnerships for Environmental Defense Fund. And then we have Paul Kelly, External Affairs. I'm sorry, at the end, we have Paul, and Corporate Responsibility Director for ASDA, which is Walmart's UK operations, joining us by video from London, I believe. And Doug Grossman here is the Vice President of Supply Chain for 20th Century Fox Home Entertainment. So we're going to talk a little bit today, I think, about how we arrived at some of these numbers and what they mean for suppliers. Elizabeth, I wanted to start with you and ask you, 20 million metric tons is a not insignificant number. As we've heard so far here, you know, it's roughly the footprint of Walmart's corporate footprint over the past year. How did you arrive at this number?
Well, I wanted to start off first by telling Mike that I didn't tell Fred to wear a Walmart blue tie, okay, for the record. Thanks for having us here, and we're really excited because this has been a long road to get here. And the 20 million metric tons was something that we agreed on. It made sense from the perspective of looking where the biggest opportunities were across product categories, and then what were the top sellers for Walmart. Looking at those, trying to find a goal that was aggressive yet achievable. And I'd like to point out that it's almost less the number itself. The real importance, I think, is the change in perspective that this brings. This is about like changing from using a microscope to find carbon reductions to using a satellite where you can find opportunities across the globe. It's smart, it finds the biggest opportunities, it gets carbon reductions now. We're not waiting for the world or the U.S. to act. It's the supply chain, and the Walmart supply chain is where the action is. And you know, this is an opportunity for suppliers across the globe to find energy efficiency opportunities. These are suppliers that probably won't be affected by national and international regulation, and it's a good opportunity to get action now. So that puts it in perspective, hopefully.
Good. And can you explain a little bit about how suppliers will be measured and how their goals will be set?
Sure. The project team, which includes Environmental Defense Fund, Walmart, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Clear Carbon Consulting, and with help from others like the University of Arkansas Applied Sustainability Center, has worked long and hard to create a document that will find ways to measure, account for, assess all of the different projects that we're doing to make sure that there really are real carbon reductions. This is uncharted waters. Nobody's done this yet, so we're going to open it up to the world to comment on, hopefully within a couple of weeks, put it out there, get people's thoughts and feedback, because we've worked hard to make sure that this is real and accurate, but we can always try and do a better job.
Great. Doug, you and I were speaking a little bit earlier about what it meant for you as a business, your business, to participate in this. You're part of the pilot program. From a supplier's point of view, how did this affect your operations and your manufacturing?
Okay, well, Fox got involved back in 2006 in this pilot program that I mentioned earlier when we were talking, and the first thing that we needed to do was, because I'm a business guy, I'm not a scientist, I don't know, I'm not familiar with carbon footprint and how to assess it and so forth. So the first thing we did was to engage some consultants to help us with that, people who are experts. And so we got Clear Carbon Consulting to help us with that. And once we knew what our footprint was, that gave us an opportunity to see where to look within our supply chain and see where we had waste and inefficiency. And so we were able to identify that packaging was our greatest opportunity to make some headway. So that's where we put our focus for the last several years, is making reductions in our packaging.
And did you find that there was that your biggest source of carbon was also your biggest potential for money saving as well?
It was. Yeah, we were able to trim our packaging, and our packaging is made primarily of plastic, and we were able to make significant cuts in the amount of plastic that we were using. And this was all occurring at a time when oil prices were rocketing up, and so what we were able to do is we were able to remain cost neutral, so no cost increases to Walmart, to the consumer, and of course then we were able to have significant carbon savings as well. So it was a great win for the customer, for Walmart, for the supplier community, because it was more than just Fox. It started off with a couple of studios, and it's spread now. It's the whole, all movie studios are now using lighter weight packaging as a result of the work that we've done.
Okay. And Jim, can you and Paul talk a little bit about what sort of resources will be available to these suppliers? How will you help them set their goals, and how will you help them achieve those goals?
Okay, well, we're going to be very targeted about the products that we start with. So this isn't something that's going to be shotgunned out to every category or every product. We spent a lot of time looking at, with the help of the Applied Sustainability Center, which are the high impact categories we should start with. So the first thing we're doing is narrowing the universe. And then what we want to do is engage with both the suppliers in those categories and the buyers, and support them with a technical team who understand the background of the energy side of this, the carbon side of this, and start convening those suppliers in different ways. I think there'll be different ways of engaging different categories, but providing expertise. I think that in a lot of cases, our suppliers have some good ideas. It's very unlikely, I think, there'll be many cases where we go in and we have a better idea than they have. But what we want to do is create that environment where those good ideas can flourish, that deliver cost reductions, benefits to the suppliers, and benefits to the consumers. So it genuinely will be a team effort with technical resources behind it too, to help the suppliers through it.
Now, what would happen if, say, a supplier found that where they really needed to cut back was in their manufacturing operations, and that was very difficult for them, that was going to be a costly move for them? How will you address something like that?
Well, we're only going to pursue those projects which are economically viable. So in some cases, yes, if for example, you were looking at the production of bread, for example, and we looked at it with the suppliers, and we found that maybe there's more efficient bakery ovens, perhaps. Then we'd have to look at the capital cost of replacing those or making those better and calculate the payback, because we're certainly not going to be asking suppliers to do anything other than reduce those emissions and also reduce the costs, which then flow through to benefits to the customers. So it's a rational economic discussion at the end of the day.
Okay. We spoke a little bit, or Mr. Duke spoke a little earlier about the willingness to continue to grow as a company, but also to keep sustainability in check. Where do you see the intersection of those two things? You have a number here that you're trying to achieve. Will you ever be able to set a baseline target for carbon growth where it also comes to capital growth?
Well, the first thing we have to do is understand what the baseline is in our supply chain. And at the moment, I mean, as Elizabeth was saying, this is really uncharted territory. The data on this is very in immature stages. But this project hopefully will improve that data. So once we have a better handle on the data and we've got some wins where we can show that, yes, efforts focused at specific categories can benefit suppliers and customers, then I think you start going to scale to reduce it much more broadly. But yes, we're still going to carry on growing as a business because we'll be adding more stores around the world. But the underlying philosophy here is that if we can have a greater impact there in the supply chain, and as was mentioned earlier, our initial goal is 1.5 times greater than our projected growth out to 2015. So I think it's about spreading it to scale as we learn more about doing this.
Right. And maybe you can
build on
Paul, yes, go
what
ahead.
Meaghan. If I could just build on what Jim was saying, I think you can decouple business growth from carbon growth, and that's something that we've learnt in Asda over the last 2 years. We're able to say today that since 2007, we've reduced our absolute carbon footprint, our direct carbon footprint, by 7% or 83,000 tonnes. But in that time, we've grown by 36 stores and by 2.5 million customers. So we've been able to achieve business growth and reduce our carbon footprint and the carbon intensity of our business. So for every £1 million worth of sales that we generate, today it's the equivalent of 66 tonnes of carbon. 2 years ago, it was 83 tonnes of carbon.
Okay. And Paul, maybe you can answer this question. Is there an educational component here? How will this information be passed on to the consumer, and does the average consumer care already?
I think the consumer does care. I think there's two aspects to it. The first is consumers, certainly in the UK context, are expecting retailers to do this and to make these decisions for them. But one of the most successful ad campaigns that we've run in the UK at Asda was last year, where we linked the savings that we'd made as a business by being more sustainable to how we rolled back prices. And it was the campaign that resonated with consumers, and they said, now I get how you get lower prices. It's by switching the lights off, it's by driving less miles, it's by reducing the amount of packaging that you use in product. And that was certainly one of our biggest drivers last year in terms of consumer awareness. And so communicating this to customers in a way of how it saves them money. So at the moment we've just launched a new refillable detergent system, which over 10 refills saves our customers the equivalent of $5.50, and is 96% less packaging than the equivalent was. And they get that and they can see that, and it's the very real examples that bring it alive for customers.
Interesting. And perhaps it's also important to note that, Doug, as you were mentioning to me, that the standards that you had sort of accepted for your packaging have started to become industry standards. So do you want to talk a little bit about how, I see your packaging,
yeah,
if you want to explain.
Talk about using less packaging. And back in 2006, this was a movie that we released, and it's a standard DVD case, and you can see it looks like a standard DVD case. 3 years later, another movie we released, similar looking package, but if you open it up and you look inside, you can see it looks different on the inside. And consumers, the DVD goes here, just like it did on the other one, but it's got the nice, recycle little insignia in there. But these are all cutouts. So that's plastic that we've reduced without making any change to our manufacturing process or supply chain. And this is, that's just an example of the kind of thing that we were able to do, cutting out the plastic and keeping costs down.
Right, and that packaging, of course, doesn't come. You purchase that from another. That's correct. Supplier.
We don't manufacture it ourselves, but a supplier provides it, and it's now most DVDs you go out and buy at a Walmart you're gonna see that kind of cutout inside the DVD case.
Right.
And that translates to cost savings for the consumer.
Right. Elizabeth, another question for you. Obviously, a huge part of any supplier's carbon footprint typically is going to be transportation. That might not always be the biggest part, but typically it's a big part. Was there any effort on EDF's part to talk about more local supply chains? I know that Walmart has made some efforts in, say, local food, for example.
Well, I'd like to say that the approach that we're taking with this project is not telling suppliers that they need to, change their distribution system, but instead is looking at where the biggest opportunities for carbon pollution cuts reside. And so if it means pursuing a supplier that has a local source and therefore doesn't have to transport the goods as far, that kind of thing is counting now. Buyers are looking for that. This is becoming deeply embedded in this company. I will tell you a little story that just happened when I was waiting in one of the supplier conference rooms before this event. I overheard, because you can overhear very easily in the supplier conference room, what that was happening in the next room over. And it was a supplier pitching the buyer saying, this product is a 90% post-consumer recycled content, and was explaining why he had chosen one thing over another. And unless Walmart's planted the person next to me, that's an example of how this is becoming deeply embedded, and the buyers are looking for this from the suppliers, and the suppliers are really thinking hard about where are the biggest opportunities, what can they do, what makes the most change, and that's counting. It's about real environmental progress, and that kind of stuff is adding up here.
Very good. I think that brings us to about the end of our time here, so thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah.
All right, thanks again, Meaghan. Thank you for the whole panel. And I think it's been a great meeting. We're right on schedule, so I appreciate everybody being very punctual. It's what Elizabeth just mentioned, certainly what others have mentioned, the DVD packaging example, is just a great way of looking across. If we start looking across our entire global supply chain with this eye on innovation through the lens of sustainability, it's amazing what we can do to not only drive out waste and lower costs for our customers, but also, too, cut the greenhouse gas emissions out of the product. So once again, thank you to all our guests. Thank you to the Walmart speakers this morning. I really appreciate it. And we look forward to now achieving this goal. So this concludes this ends the webcast.